You know what? I'm honestly getting kind of bored of this set. I think it's time we take this thing up a notch. That seems safe. Bet you've always wondered what it looks like above my studio. I'm kidding, not a single person has ever wondered that. 45 degrees, summertime. This is gonna be a crazy insurance claim if this comes down. It's like they always say, a life lived not in your ceiling is a life not lived at all. How's it going, Google debunkers, and welcome to my ceiling. The other day, I was getting ready to make a short form video and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to talk about. I was like, oh, it could be cool to talk about like a interesting amber fossil. So I started doing a little bit of digging into some interesting examples, which is when I came across this. It's an article called Ammonite in Amber. It's not often that you see a marine shell as an amber fossil, so it's like, that's kind of cool. So I clicked on the article to learn a little bit more. All right, now I want to just read you like the first 2 sentences of this so you can try and picture the wave of emotions that swept over me. Amber offers an incredible insight into the past due to the snapshots of life often captured in this fossilized tree resin. One such amber insight has left evolutionist scientists confused and unable to provide a suitable account for the presence of a sea creature contained within it. I clicked on this article like happy as can be. I was free-ranging, prancing through the field of knowledge. And then when I read the word evolutionist, it felt like I fell into a pit of punji sticks. So I went to the top of the page and I realized that the website this is from is called Creation.com. I was like, oh shit, Milo, you probably should have noticed that before you clicked the article. I continued prancing through the amber fields of grain or whatever and found the hell ant, which is what I ended up making my short on. But I kept this article open in another tab because I was like, I want to learn a little more about this. So we are gathered here today just beneath my studio's uninsulated roof to go over a few of my favorite articles that I have found in my deep dive on creation.com. I've lumped them roughly into 4 categories: archaeology, natural history, dinosaurs, and of course, evolution. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Milo Rossi, and without further ado, welcome to whatever this is. Reading terrible articles from a creation science website. Who needs a snappy name? It just speaks for itself.
Welcome to Creation Ministries International.
I suppose I should probably give like a little idea of what creationism even is. I'm sure most people do, but I want to make sure we're all starting from zero here. Young Earth Creationism is an extreme form of biblical literalism. It's the idea that the Earth was formed 6,000 literal years ago by the Abrahamic God, and for the most part outright denies most scientific disciplines. Biology, evolution, geology, natural history, ecology are all incompatible with the Young Earth Creationist worldview. Now also, to make abundantly clear, Young Earth Creationists and Christians are not one and the same. An overwhelming majority of Christians believe in actual science, and a belief in a divine power and a belief in science are not mutually exclusive. I also say that to make abundantly clear to all of you watching, I'm not here to be like, I'm gonna disprove the existence of God. That is insanely stupid, pretty much impossible, and just a colossal waste of everybody's time and energy. So this video is not me attacking Christians, not me attacking the Bible, not me attacking the existence of God, Jesus, any of that stuff. You can believe in whatever or whoever you want, I'm gonna give you 2 thumbs up for it. But when you deny objective reality, or worse, create propaganda that preys on less educated people to make them also deny objective reality, then I'm gonna have a big fucking problem with it. Anti-intellectualism and disinformation is a scourge upon the face of the earth, and it will be the undoing of our society if we don't fucking do something about it. Boom, giant disclaimer, jump scare. Sorry about that. I just have to do that at the start of all these videos. 1, so that people know I'm not alienating them, and 2, just to make sure everyone keeps it civil in the comments. I don't wanna see any of that 2014 Reddit atheist bullshit, okay? Don't make me come down there. So anyway, I started out with this ammonite in amber thing, and after I read the word evolutionist, of course I had to continue reading the article. It talks about a 99 million year old, allegedly 99 million year old, little chunk of amber that contains an ammonite fossil. And they're like, wow, this is super weird because you don't normally find these things together. I'm like, yeah, that is super weird, awesome. The scientific paper concluded it is rare to find aquatic organisms in amber, and it is extremely rare to find marine organisms in amber, let alone macroscopic marine organisms mixed with intertidal, terrestrial, and potentially freshwater aquatic organisms. Now, personally, I think this is kind of a no-brainer. I have seen trees growing near the water, so the idea of sap ending up in the water is kind of logical to me. It also would make sense that it's more rare because most sap isn't going to end up in the water, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. So anyway, you may be asking yourself, what the hell does an ammonite trapped in amber have to do with young earth creationism? Well, I'll tell you. At the bottom of this article, we have a section called "The Bible is Key," where it says, in the initial stages of the flood, there would have been a mass of uprooted trees in the water, many violently torn off and broken. As they were carried along, they would have released large amounts of tree resin into the water. This sticky resin would have engulfed small organisms from a diverse range of ecosystems, both from the trees and those disturbed from their normal habitat by the flood waters, capital F flood, including this ultra rare ammonite. So in short, this specimen is used as proof of the great flood from the Bible. Now I want to introduce you guys to this website as a whole, so I'm not going to go into this article too much, but the one thing that I would have to say to this is if there was a giant flood that uprooted all these trees, and that's where the amber came from for the most part. It sounds like much of the amber in the world would be from an event where all the trees get washed away, is what's implied here. Why the fuck would there only be one example of a seashell in the amber? How come all pieces of amber aren't like pocked with sand or, filled with just more marine detritus? The fact that they acknowledge this as an ultra rare ammonite, if anything, is proof that something like this just doesn't happen very often. Anyway, after I read this article, I went to the homepage of this website, and this is where things really took off exponentially. First, I noticed that they have a couple magazines. One of them is called Journal of Creation, which is our peer-reviewed journal is at the cutting edge of origins research. It's published online in March, July, and November. It mostly looks like a bunch of origin of life stuff, which is not my forte. I'm not a molecular biologist or have any understanding of that, so I'll leave that to Professor Dave. And then their other magazine is called simply Creation Magazine. And this one kind of cracks me up because it sort of looks like a magazine I would have subscribed to as a kid. They all just look like a nature magazine. They have, an animal on the front. It's called Creation, so it's not like super, I guess that's pretty overt, but it kind of looks like it could just be like a photography or like an outdoor magazine. You come down here, you get some really nice ones with some AI slop covers, which is just awesome. I have thought about subscribing to one of these magazines and like collecting them for a year and then doing a big video on it, but I don't know if I want to give these people $30. I feel like that's too much. That's way too much. So anyway, after that, I wanted to have a look at the articles that are actually on the website, and I found there's a little drop down for topics. I'm like, that seems like a great place to look. You got a nice picture of a fancy library, feels super, this must be a real official publication. And oh my God, it gets really fun right off the bat. We got a whole category for aliens, apologetics like flat earth, and things like that. We've got the Bible, we've got biology, creation relevance, dating. If you're having dating problems, you can come to the the Creation website. I'm not really sure what dating problems have to do with the pigs taking it all. That's a little weird sounding. My ex-wife took the kids. There's of course a whole section on dinosaurs and an ethics tab, which includes such hits as poverty, euthanasia, abortion, and eugenics. Oh, and war. Now, needless to say, I could spend fucking days going through this website. I could make a video that is like hours upon hours long. There's so much here. So I decided to just kind of dial it in on a couple gems, a couple ambers, if you will. And the first place that I decided to look was, of course, archaeology. Oh, this could be more comfortable, actually. Whoa, maybe that's not more comfortable. I don't know. This wasn't designed for comfort. The fuck are those chairs called? Those really expensive office chairs? This is gonna drive me crazy. It's not even a funny joke. An Ames chair. Yeah, it's like the Ames chair of attics. It's the Cadillac of attics. It's the Cadillac of attics. The reason I wanna start with archaeology here is because the archaeology section absolutely blew my mind. In like a good way. There's a lot of stuff in it that's obviously like biblical archaeology, which frankly, I just don't really care about. That's the place for biblical people to deal with, is to find their evidences and research their section of the world. Good on them. 2 thumbs up, biblical archaeology is a thing, have at it. But I was curious if we were gonna be getting any sort of weird lost civilization, any sort of weird, race politics stuff. And so I immediately found an article called How Did They Build the Great Pyramids? And I was like, I've gotta see what they gotta say here. Now, amazingly, I cannot believe that I am saying this, but in my, albeit not extensive reading, my scanning of this article, it seems as though this is like an actual article about how the pyramids were actually made. It talks about ramps. It gives different examples of how ramps could have been done and how they would have been constructed. It's just crazy to me that this article about the pyramids on a Young Earth Creationist propaganda website is better than anything that I've ever heard a pseudo-archaeologist claim about the pyramids. Then again, I guess pseudo-archaeology and the pyramids go together like a trash bag full of packing peanuts and a jerry can full of gasoline. But I was still kind of shook by this. So I don't know, 1 point already for the Creationist website. The next article that I found was from 2024 when there was those alleged Peruvian mummies that were unveiled. And the article is called "Peruvian Alien Mummies Are Fraudulent Artifacts. So-called alien remains found in Peru have been shown instead to consist of animal bones and glue." Which I said the exact same thing when I made my video on it, because it's objectively true. But if this whole website stuck to the objective truth, we wouldn't be here watching this video, now would we? Now, while I agree with this article for the most part, it's by the time we get down to the summary that some of the tremors of what this website has to hold begin to show themselves. What are we to make of a fakery of this sort? Perhaps money and fame may be an immediate motivation, but it also increases interest in the notion of UFOs and aliens in a world where access to unverified material and videos on the internet is all too easy for many people. These frauds are potentially harmful to those without a questioning mind and/or the academic skills to weigh evidence properly. Belief in aliens is certainly used as a means of leading people away from Christian teaching and faith. Similarly, fraudulent claims have often been used in support of evolution, and that one is a hyperlink, which of course takes you to an article called "On Evolution and Fraud," which right off the bat I see the Piltdown Man, and I think that was the Nebraska Man, both pseudo-archaeological discoveries, the latter of which I have a whole video dedicated to, and something that creation scientists constantly go back to because they don't have a leg to stand on other than the mistakes of bad science from, 150 years ago. We would encourage people, and especially Christians, to develop critical thinking skills and to exercise discernment when it comes to claims that go beyond what the Bible teaches. Remember, guys, we want you all to be super open-minded and critical thinking because the internet is a dangerous place that can lead you astray. But remember, don't believe anything that isn't in the Bible. It is human beings alone who are created in the image of God by the Creator who made all things. I just think it's hilarious to see Young Earth Creationist propaganda mouthpiece talking about how these frauds are potentially harmful to those without a questioning mind and/or the academic skills to weigh evidence properly. That is literally the way that things like creationism are able to perpetuate, because they prey on people that have been left behind by our government's failed education system and feed them misinformation that reinforces their biases. I was kind of disappointed by the archaeology stuff, honestly. It was funny to agree with them on most things, but I was like, well, there's nothing interesting here. So then, of course, I decided to look into some of the other articles, and this is where things got really fun. Oh, where am I? I tried to get out of the attic, and I somehow got lost, and I've been crawling through an infinite attic for 2 days. I just dropped down. I think I'm in somebody else's house. I have no idea why someone else would have all this stuff. It's a little concerning, actually. As most of you already know, I don't take any sponsorships on this channel. Due to my personal convictions, I refuse to use my platform to try and sell you guys the products of our data-scraping, strike-breaking, money-hungry corporate overlords. This is admittedly an incredibly stupid decision on my part, because a single video sponsorship for a channel of this size can easily be worth into the 5 figures. But because I value all of you and am a little bit too strong in my personal beliefs, there is no paycheck big enough for me to become the mouthpiece of those responsible for the destruction of civilization. That said, I do understand that money is what makes the world go round, and this channel is the livelihood of not only myself, but my 8-person creative team that make all these videos possible. Which is why, rather than making money from sponsorships, we would prefer to make cool art. This beautiful poster was hand-drawn by my wonderful partner Z, thank you Z, and it features the 8 different pseudo-archaeological topics that I have discussed in my Awful Archaeology series. Now, if you look at this and can't immediately tell that it's in reference to a YouTube series, that's the point. The goal of all the merch that we make here is for it to not look like merch, which is why this design is based on one of those cool old-fashioned, like 1950s classroom screen print posters. It contains hand-done drawings of each of the different pseudo-archaeological topics, as well as a little blurb explaining them written by yours truly. And as you guys also know, I am a big fan of stickers, and so if you don't want to commit to a whole poster but still want to get some cool art and support the channel, you can get Sticker Pack. Check those out. Does the Dendera light look rather phallic? Absolutely. Is that our fault? No, we're not the ones that carved it, okay? We're just the ones drawing it. And as part of my pledge to support real human artists, a portion of each sale goes directly to the artist themselves. So if you wanna grab some cool art to decorate your house or apartment and support the channel while doing it, you can go to miniminuteman.com or check the link in the description of this video. In fact, why don't you do that now before you forget? Just click it and it'll open up in another tab. And that way, when you're done with the video, it'll be there and you'll be like, oh, I wanted to do this. And then we get to keep making videos. Do it. No, seriously, do it. Click the button. Click it right now. No, seriously, do it. Click the button. Seriously, open it in a new tab. I'm not gonna ask you again. On behalf of myself and the rest of the team, thank you very much for all purchases. It allows us to remain sponsorship free while continuing to make the videos that you and I love so much. And now, let's head back to the attic. I absolutely love natural history, as I'm sure you guys are painfully aware. I know I'm like an archaeology educator, but honestly, I cover natural history the same, if not more, than I do archaeology, because it's always been a huge interest of mine. As many of you are aware, my primary degree was in environmental science. I went to a vocational high school where I studied environmental science for 4 years before that, so I love the natural world. Geology, ecology, biology, all that stuff. Think it's super interesting. So this was like driving bamboo wedges underneath my fingernails. What's with all the like bamboo related torture jokes in this video? Today's theme is bamboo torture. Next party you throw, bamboo torture. It's all the rage. All the kids are doing it. The peculiar penguin. The reason I wanted to talk about this article is because it highlights something that I think is very strange about young Earth creationists. Let me just read you the subheading here. The penguin kind was able to diversify into many species, and their variety reflects their varied, unique characteristics and design features. Now, there's a word in there that's a little weird. The fuck is a penguin kind? I've heard of mankind, I've heard of humankind. I don't know what the fuck a penguin kind is. So a majority of this article is like just them marveling at how cool penguins are, which is fucking legit. Love me a penguin. All right, so once we get past them just marveling about how cool penguins are, we get down to the part where this actually has to do with creationism, called fossil fact and fiction intertwine. Evolutionists claim that the penguin's evolution has been extensively documented by many well-defined fossils. They then verbatim outline all of that extensive documentation, and then say that the oldest is supposedly about 62 million years old from partial reconstructions in New Zealand, and that these are described at being more like loons and belong to a different family of bird altogether. Alleged penguin ancestry beyond this is said to remain unknown, yet the facts of the entire evolutionary account are constantly being altered as various fossils discovered in rock layers considered older than previous discoveries necessitates the rewriting of history. Okay, so now you can really see what is in store for us with this website, because the mask is fully off here. Science once said this thing, and then they said this thing. So nothing is real. No, that's literally just how fucking science works. You keep researching stuff and gaining new information to get a better idea of what the fuck is going on. The fact that they call it rewriting history is fucking hilarious, because that implies that there's something like, you know, kind of nefarious around it. You know, the secret cabal of big science gathers together and they're like, how can we manipulate the masses by making them believe in previously undiscovered species of ancestral penguin? Like, bro, no one's thinking that, okay? What the fuck has to be going on in your head? The rewriting of history is people finding new fossils that give us a greater understanding of evolutionary history. That doesn't mean that people have been like wrong the whole fucking time. That means we didn't have the evidence then, and we have the evidence now. So now we've changed what we know. So the thing I mentioned earlier about the penguin kind, what the hell's that about? If you see an article talking about biology and evolution and it uses the word kind, that's a kind of a dead giveaway that you're reading something written by a young Earth creationist, or at least is sympathetic to young Earth creationism. Because kind is the young Earth creationist term for like, there's not even really a parallel in the actual science world because it's not a fucking thing. It's sort of like a family of animals, like dogs and penguins and giraffes and I can't think of any more animals. Those are all the animals there are. And I think there's two reasons why they do this. One is that a lot of young Earth creationists now sort of like acknowledge evolution on a small scale, microevolution, if you will, which is its own can of worms that we're gonna get into in just a second. And two, because I think that even a biblical literalist young Earth creationist knows that it is absolutely patently fucking ridiculous to believe that 2 of every species of animal fit on Noah's Ark. So instead of saying, you know, species or whatever, they use the biblical term of kinds to imply that Noah brought 2 of each kind onto the ark, 2 of each dog, 2 of each giraffe, 2 of each, I don't remember what the other thing was that I said. I guess there's only two kinds of animals now. And in the post-flood, post-diluvian world, those kinds had micro-evolution that turned them into their different varieties. You know, the dog turned into the wolf and the dingo and the domestic dog, whatever. Now, is that insanely stupid? Yes, but let's read just the last little bit of this article because I promise it gets even better. When we look into the entire living world, the neo-Darwinian account of evolution doesn't add up. For one thing, we just don't see the substantial numbers of mutations resulting in gain of functional information that would be expected. We see many mutations steadily accumulating. Okay, when young Earth creationists talk about kinds and how micro, small-scale evolution is possible, how the fuck do you not believe in just evolution? You are just talking about evolution. You believe in evolution. I would almost respect it more if they didn't believe that microevolution was possible, because then I could just be like, well, you're just wrong. But here it's like you're acknowledging that it can happen. So how are you denying that it's the driving force of all life on the planet? They're like, oh yeah, things can maybe change, a little bit in a few generations, but like, none of this big stuff, the Kent Hovind fucking bullshit of, you never see a seahorse give birth to an elephant.
I think it's to believe a protista turned to a human.
Yeah, you don't see that because it doesn't happen. You know what did happen, on the other hand, Kent? You beat your wife. I don't think Jesus would have been such a big fan of that, you fucking jackass. They use this macroevolution argument as like a bad faith thing of being like, we see little changes, but we never see whole new species arise because species are just some bullshit that we've found to categorize the way that life works. Life does not work with these rigid boundaries. I know that these people can't hear me, but my thing that I always want to say whenever I hear people talk like this is, imagine you got a leak in your basement. You catch it after a few hours, and there's a little puddle on the floor. You're like, ah, shit. You call the plumber, you fix it up, blah, blah, blah. Now imagine that exact same leak happened right when you were about to travel for like 2 months. And you come back 2 months later, your basement is an in-ground pool. That is how evolution works. You got little changes that don't add up to a lot on the small scale. It adds up a lot over a really long time. I genuinely don't know how you can believe in one and not the other. Here's another article called Plants and Animals Around the World, which attempts to explain the distribution of life in different places. They start off with a quote from, Richard Dawkins talking about how the pattern of geographical distribution of plants and animals is what you'd expect from evolution and not what you'd expect from Noah's Ark. And their response is, nuh-uh. However, this distribution of animals is also what we would expect following the Genesis flood. Birds would have dispersed from the Middle East, where the Ark landed, with some eventually settling on the Galapagos Islands. Subsequent variations and natural selection among the descendants of these finches would then have occurred because they had the inbuilt genetic capacity to change quickly. Wait a second. So they're implying that, these kinds diversified into multiple different species rather rapidly, which is way closer to the whole bullshit about a whale giving birth to a pine tree than anything any actual scientist has ever said. That beer's not working fast enough, let me tell you. However, similar plants and animals are frequently found on different continents separated by large stretches of land or ocean. This pattern is not what you would expect if they evolved slowly over millions of years, but is consistent with a biblical account of creation and the global flood. For example, many similar plant and animal groups are found around the land bordering oceans. This is such a consistent pattern that migration and transportation seems a much better explanation for biogeography than evolution. Let's see some of their examples for that. Evolutionists, oh god, I forgot to mention this earlier. If you see evolutionist or neo-Darwinian, those are also both like massive creationist red flags. Evolutionism, evolutionist, neo-Darwinist is not a thing. I know that they'd point at me and say that I'm that, but that's not like a thing. They need to frame it as though it's like a religion, because it levels the playing field for them to presuppose that their religion supersedes the facts of fucking reality. Evolutionists sometimes try to explain distinct distributions of continental drift. They say that the continents split apart millions of years ago, and when they did, similar species of plants and animals that once lived side by side were separated. That's exactly what happened. Need I say more? One problem with this explanation is that, according to evolutionary theory, many species that are disjuncted across previously joined continents evolved after their separation. For example, South America and Africa allegedly separated around 100 million years ago, but species of cactus, which is supposedly evolved in South America around 30 million years ago, were also found in Africa. In the same way, the evolutionary accounts of the emergence of rodents found in South America and Africa do not fit the generally accepted timing of continental drift. So I had to look into this one a little bit because, as you'll notice, they don't say fucking anything about this. They don't tell you what species of mouse, they don't say what species of cactus, which is the way that pseudoscientists and anti-intellectuals like this will operate. They'll just give you this information and expect you to take it at face value without questioning it. Run that quote of whatever they said earlier in the article about the aliens about critical thinking, because it's hilarious. These frauds are potentially harmful to those without a questioning mind and or the academic skills to weigh evidence properly. So I had to look into these, and I'm pretty sure the cactus they're talking about is the Christmas cactus, and no biologist on the planet claims that the Christmas cactus or the mouse species is the result of continental drift. Both species are thought to have been introduced across the Atlantic Ocean, the rodents likely drifting on debris, as well as the cactus whose seeds or whatever could have also somehow been carried by birds. There's tons of fucking examples of this. There's the silver sword in Hawaii. There's like 50 different species of them on the different islands, and it's most closely related to part of the sunflower family from North America, and it's believed to have been introduced to the Hawaiian Islands by birds that make that flight like fucking millions of years ago. In fact, it's believed to have been there for such a long time that the island it was first introduced to has already sunk beneath the waves, and that subsequent populations colonized the next islands and evolved in their own ways there. So it's a straw man to say that evolutionists chalk this all up to continental drift, because we see distribution events like this take place that are much more rapid. While living marsupials are largely restricted to Australia and South America, possums, their fossils from rocks classified as late Cretaceous, between 85 and 65 million years old, are found exclusively in Europe, Asia, and North America. The fact that they even mention that Australia and South America are the places where the most marsupials exist is evidence of the biogeographic realms that are all explained because of fucking evolution. Before the evolution of placental mammals, us, the ones with the placentas, well, some of us, most mammals were marsupials. And then when, was it Gondwana that split apart? Was it Gondwana, South America, Antarctica, and Australia? When that split apart, those ones remained populated by marsupials, placental mammals evolved elsewhere, and then eventually sort of invaded and mostly outcompeted the other marsupials. The reason why Australia had like almost all of the niches filled with a marsupial, like, you know, thylacines, it had like a lion-like marsupial, it's got a kangaroo, which is just insane, is because for the most part, up until humans got there, it was pretty cut off in its own biogeographic realm, and so placental mammals never really outcompeted everything there. That is evidence of fucking evolution. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I don't want to talk about that anymore. Yes, here's where it gets really fun. Now we're gonna talk about coal. This article is called A Beds Origin for Coal. If you're wondering what beds is, well, of course, it's briefly exposed diluvial sediments. Beds, or briefly exposed diluvial sediments, in which local or regional falls of water of Noah's flood temporarily expose freshly laid sediments. This model has been used to explain dinosaur tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds in the early flood, as well as other geological challenges. It also provides one mechanism for the origin of coal. So the coal beds, especially those in North America, are from the Carboniferous period, literally named because of the massive deposits of carbon they left behind. They were massive humid swamps that died and piled up and got buried and compressed and turned into coal. So let's have a look as to how they explain, tens of millions of years worth of coal layers. The problem with the peat swamp theory. Secular scientists say that the coal formed from compressed peat. Because of their strong belief in uniformitarianism, largely excluding catastrophe, they have little choice but to believe the peat swamp or coal swamp theory. Peat is defined as, I don't give a shit what peat is defined as. It covers about 3% of the Earth's surface, blah, blah, blah. To form peat, the water in bogs must be acidic to protect the accumulating plant matter from oxidization. Otherwise, the plant remains will simply decay. Rate of accumulation also must match exactly the rate at which the vast bog subsides. When they throw things in that, like an italicized exactly, they're one, being facetious, and two, trying to just spread doubt to make it sound really challenging, even though there's massive peat bogs all over the world. It's not a hard thing to form. We see them everywhere. There's no exactitude about it. It's a fucking peat bog. Next, the peat must be buried by thousands of meters of sediments and compressed and heated. At last, the coal must be found at the surface. These overlying sediments must be eroded away. Although the peat swamp theory has been popular for nearly 200 years, it has numerous problems compared with the alternative theory of transport and burial in marine environment. First, marine fossils are often associated with coal, such as clams and various fish. Are we sure that those are marine? Because that is something that also occurs in freshwater ecosystems. If they are marine, which I would not be surprised if some of them are, it will be because these swamps are at the margins of massive low-lying continents, and sometimes the Earth is lower, sometimes it is higher. The things are not constant. It wasn't just like a swamp that existed exactly where it was for thousands of millions of years and then got buried all at once. This is the land moving and water flowing over and sand coming in, and then the ocean recedes and more swamp grows on top. The Earth is it's moved slowly, but it fucking moves. They also talk about tree trunks that are found petrified, like through multiple layers of strata, which are very cool and very rare. Most of the time they're found upright, and they are from a short-term catastrophe, you know, a tsunami, a flood, a volcanic eruption, something like that. And they're very interesting, but they use that as evidence that, like, look, these trees intersect multiple layers, and so therefore, this must have been the Great Flood. But if this was from the Great Flood, we would find these entire petrified trees fucking everywhere. There would not be layers of peat, mostly decomposed organic material that's created these big, you know, carbon layers. We would find these stumps in every single coal seam everywhere because the world was ripped up, laid low, buried, compressed, and then what, eroded out again? This makes no sense. Here's another fun one on geology. Devil's Tower, powerful witness to flood runoff. One, not Devil's Tower. We'll stick with Bear Lodge. Thank you very much. This would be like if I pretended that I discovered the Vatican and I called it Ozzy Osbourne's porta potty. During the massive runoff of the recessive stage of Noah's flood, thousands of erosional remnants were left behind. They're known as inselbergs, isolated rock structures rising abruptly from an otherwise generally level surface. Many of these inselbergs are tall with steep slopes and so could not have lasted millions of years. Now, they do correctly claim here that the Bear Lodge is the remains of a cooled, like, volcanic cone. I've talked about Bear Lodge a lot because every moron conspiracy theorist on TikTok thinks that it's a giant tree stump because they were presumably lobotomized at a young age. Young Earth Creationists apparently believe that while it is a volcano, it's evidence of the Great Flood. So, you know, one step forward, two steps back, I guess. The survival of Bear Lodge is especially puzzling because steep or vertical rock faces erode much faster than horizontal surfaces. This is because steep slopes are strongly affected by gravity with rock slides and falls. Furthermore, the extensive vertical cracks at the tower would be prone to destruction by freeze-thaw weathering. Cracks fill the water during storms, and when it freezes during the cold months, the cracks enlarge. It seems the only way to explain Bear Lodge is to allow for the rapid recent erosion of the high plains sedimentary rock, leaving behind the erosional remnant of the lava conduit. It is consistent with sheet flow erosion as the water of Noah's flood were draining off the continent in very wide channels. The tower remained tall after the flood, probably because the rock from the tower was more resistant and/or the erosion rate of the flowing water was reduced in the area. So what I'm hearing here is that the reason it stands is because all the rock around it eroded because it's softer, which is true. So why are we acting as though it's a surprise that it's still standing up, given the actual geologic explanation? It's still eroding. It will erode all the way eventually. We just happen to exist at a time when the stuff around it has eroded and it is still in the process of eroding. I would also imagine that with all those little nooks and crannies you're talking about, if there was a flood capable of suddenly eroding the volcano from off of this magma chamber, the floodwater would probably be moving fast enough to turn this thing into a pile of matchsticks fucking 800 miles that way. Also, if the world's only 6,000 years old in your eyes anyway, what's even the point of this? Creationists will always talk about the Lake Missoula flood over in Washington from the end of the last ice age to be like, look, it's possible, which, like, the point is not that us Darwinists don't believe in giant floods. It's the fact that any catastrophe, from a giant flood to a tsunami to a volcano, while they may be different on an individual basis, for the most part have functioned the exact same way for all of Earth's history. So we can look at evidence of these events now and be able to look in the geologic record to find evidence of places where things like that have happened in the past. Those giant trees that they were just talking about stuck in the coal beds, those are evidence of natural disasters. The difference between the rapid draining of Lake Missoula and the erosion around the Bear Lodge is that one of them was caused by a flood and one of them was caused by slow erosion of just like rainwater and wind and stuff. Because different types of erosion look different, and there's a lot of really smart people who can help identify what type of erosion you're looking at. This is not a debate. We know this one very well. It is not a tree, and it is not the remnants of a great flood. How about this article for you? Anthropogenic Global Warming, AGW, a biblical and scientific approach to climate change. I'm sure this is going to be full of some wisdom. Biblical and scientific evidence shows that human-generated carbon dioxide will produce some warming, but there's no climate emergency. Guys, everything's totally fine. There's nothing to worry about. All of those scientists, all the unanimous scientists that are coming up to the same conclusion, they're a bunch of liars. They're a bunch of liars that are paid by the woke, liberal, neo-Marxist agenda. Many Christians have been asking CMI, Creation Ministries Institute, to comment on global warming, climate change, said to be caused by human-generated carbon dioxide. This happens particularly at ministry events where we have a Q&A. It is certainly a hot topic. And they say that biblical literalists don't have a sense of humor. Until now, CMI has largely avoided the issue. For one thing, we don't think it's a core creation gospel issue. Also, some people get quite emotional about the subject, so it could be a risky thing to comment upon. No matter what view we take, some of our friends are going to disagree, and we understand. They're so neutral and balanced. I like that. It's not a core creation gospel issue. We live in the Garden of Eden, motherfuckers. Look around you. We have everything we could ever want. This planet is perfect, and you are watching it burn in front of your fucking eyes. I don't give a shit if you believe there was something better before this, but this is God's creation. You look up at all those fucking stars, and you think that each one of those is a planet, and we're the only one that has his creation on it, and you don't give a shit about saving this? You're okay watching the fucking oceans turn black and the rivers run to fucking mud, and you're gonna sit there and say this isn't my fucking problem. Give me a fucking break. What's in that beer? Wow, holy fuck, haven't done that in a minute. Also, scientifically, the issue is very complex, as I have found diving into the literature. And many colleagues inside and outside CMI have critiqued and contributed to what follows. Oh God, this is a very long article. I ain't reading all that. What's at the bottom? Give me the conclusion. Okay, a Christian approach, final thoughts. In summary, the politicization of climate change has led to the corruption of the science. Yeah, like maybe the science and data being misrepresented by oil-funded state media controlled by a Christo-fascist government to make uneducated people not believe in climate change and believe that it's a political issue. I would have to agree with that. 2, over the last 100 years or so, the CO2 level has been increasing. However, the temperatures over that time have not been consistent with the hypothesis that human-generated CO2 is the prime cause of temperature increase. That is literally just bullshit. I'm not gonna read into this to see where you got that from because it's fucking wrong. It is simply fucking wrong. It is simply fucking wrong. The science is not settled, or there'd be one model, not over 100, that attempts to predict the global temperature. It's a model making a fucking prediction. We're predicting something over an incredibly long period of time. Who would have thought that someone who bases their worldview off of a black and white binary of good and evil would have a hard time understanding the nuance of a scientific model? The warming from a doubling of the CO2 is likely to be less than 1 degree Celsius, which would be beneficial to life on Earth. Climate change isn't happening, but if it is, it's not even that much of a problem. 1 degree Celsius is gonna make a big fucking difference, moron. Little things like this make me do hope that there's some kind of divine thing going on. Not in the way of big bearded guy in the sky with a fucking, lightning bolt or whatever. But like, I'm a spiritual guy. I think the Earth is an amazing place. I see God whenever I'm fucking looking at the sky too, But it pains me to know that all of the people who deny climate change and who spread all this propaganda about it are never gonna have to suffer for what they've caused. And a little piece of me wishes that I could believe in something like hell, because I think that there's some people that fucking deserve it. Don't get me wrong, I do what I can to reduce my carbon footprint, but you and I, we don't do fucking anything. It's the corporations, it's the big oil, it's the fucking CEOs, it's the government, surprise, who are not just primary drivers of the unfolding climate apocalypse, but are literally the ones that are fucking ensuring that it's going to happen. Just a brief reminder that oil companies have a lot of money and a lot of scientists, and they knew years before everyone else that climate change was going to happen, and they did fucking nothing. But again, morons like this think in black and white, that there is the apocalypse not happening and the apocalypse happening. One day we're gonna wake up and it's gonna just be really hot out, and we're gonna be like, oh, the climate change happened. It's not gonna be like that. We are the frogs in the pot of fucking water. This was one of the harshest winters in Vermont in the last 10 years. See, it snowed a lot. Climate change isn't real. It was fucking 60 degrees 2 weeks ago. That doesn't fucking happen. This past summer was a 100-year drought, and the summer before that was a 100-year flood. This is how the climate apocalypse is gonna happen, you fucking idiots. Number 6, there is no climate emergency. This is where I get really fucking cynical, guys, where I'm like, we fucking deserve this. We fucking deserve this. It just sucks that we are part of the fucking we. I really think we should send all these fucking assholes to Mars. Let the rest of us sort Eden out without the fucking snakes. Okay, let's talk about a coelacanth. The coelacanth, the transitional fossil that wasn't. Let me guess, they found coelacanths and it hasn't changed in a long time and evolution bad or something. Fuck you, I'm reading the conclusion. No coelacanth evolution. No evidence exists for coelacanth evolution, although dozens of coelacanth fossils have been found. As far as it can be determined, they are anatomically near identical to living examples. In the long-age geologic system, they are supposed to have first lived 400 million years ago, over 100 million years before the dinosaurs. Summary and conclusion. An enormous amount of research has been done on the coelacanth. Dozens of scientists have written scores of articles trying to demonstrate that it is the missing link between fish and land animals. There's another one. If anyone says missing link, banished to the creationist corner. Missing link is not a fucking thing. Like I said earlier, no animal just gives birth to another species. Species arise slowly over time. It was not like, we're not looking for a missing link in the human family tree. We have sequential species. We've got it. Firstly, it's bullshit to say that it just like hasn't evolved. It just hasn't changed much because it's really well suited to its environment. It is a fish. The ocean has been the ocean for a long fucking time. It has not had the evolutionary pressure to change. If you look at a mollusk from millions of years ago and a mollusk from today, they're pretty fucking similar. If you look at a crocodile and, you know, the ancestral crocodile things from around the dinosaur period, they also haven't changed all that much. There's a lot of these living fossils that when they have evolved so well to their environment, there is not a heavy evolutionary pressure for them to change. Most evolution happens in response to an organism's environment changing. Like I said earlier, the world is constantly changing. If a species is experiencing a new type of stress, there's a drought, there's more rain, there's fires, there's new predators, there's, you know, some other X factor, that is what drives them to evolve. Next one. Fuck. Now we get to the one called Dinosaurs in the Bible. I already crashed out fucking once. Behemoth with a tail like a cedar was probably a sauropod such as Dreadnoughtus. Leviathan was a giant croc such as Sarcosuchus or Dinosuchus. I'm not a big dinosaur guy, guys, can you tell? Does the Bible mention dinosaurs? According to the Bible, God created all kinds of land creatures on day 6 of Creation Week. Creation Week. What's up, guys? Welcome to Creation Week. Today we're gonna be making some fucking dinosaurs. Tune in tomorrow when I make a guy and then find out he doesn't want to get it on with any of the animals, so I have to take one of his ribs and turn it into a lady or something. If dinosaurs existed alongside man, particularly after the flood, why doesn't the Bible mention them? Maybe because dinosaurs have been extinct for a very long time. We're going down to the bottom. Dinosaurs for the glory of God. That's an awesome line. I like that. It sounds like it's from like a dinosaur action movie. Dinosaurs for the glory of God! And then it's like a, you know, battle charge or some shit like that. If I saw a movie like that as a kid, I would be a Young Earth Creationist today. I shouldn't be giving them any ideas, should I? Jesus. Who am I kidding? Jesus has nothing to do with this. Few creatures capture the imagination of both young and old as much as large dinosaurs. These massive creatures display the creative wonders of God. He uniquely designed them with highly specialized anatomy that allowed them to become one of the largest creatures to roam the earth. This should cause us to marvel and glorify our Creator for his wisdom and might. It's pretty cool. This article is mostly them just like grasping at straws, looking for little things in the Bible that like could loosely be interpreted as a dinosaur. It doesn't really lead anywhere because there's no mentions of dinosaurs in the Bible, because why would there be mentions of dinosaurs in the Bible? However, comma, this is where it gets really fun, because now we have one called Dinosaurs, Humans, and the Fossil Record. Just because we haven't found bones of humans and dinosaurs in the same strata does not mean that they didn't live together. Huh. A Laotian rock rat. Why is that picture here? I don't know, but I enjoy him. Is he eating a tortilla? Or is that like a cigarette carton? And on the 6th day, God created American Spirit Blues. And on the 7th day, God created the smooth, refreshing taste of Marlboro Red. According to the Bible, God created land animals and human beings on the 6th day, about 6,000 years ago. About 6,000 years ago, give or take, guys. There's some scientific deliberation happening here in the Young Earth Creationist community. Adam and Eve coexisted in the Garden of Eden at the very beginning of creation. However, evolutionists often mock and ridicule the Bible account because of the absence of evidence for the fossil record. In other words, because human and dinosaur bones have never been discovered together in the same sedimentary strata, they could not have lived contemporaneously. However, 3 specific examples illustrate the error of this logic and provide positive evidence for the credibility of the biblical account. Coelacanth, god damn it. Paleontologists believe that coelacanths went extinct about 65 million years ago. Yeah, and then they found them. Coelacanths and humans continue to coexist even though their fossil bones have never been discovered together. Because the coelacanth is a living fossil. It is very old, like you just said in the last fucking article. It's been around for a really long time and has not changed that much. And humans, a completely different thing than a fucking coelacanth, evolved more recently. Wow, we're off to a strong piece of evidence. Tuatara, endemic to New Zealand. Oh, he's so cute. Look at that. That's awesome. That's like a Pokemon. Are you fucking kidding me? That's a real thing? Thank God climate change isn't real, or I'd almost feel motivated to like take care of the planet and things like this. Native to New Zealand, this beakhead lizard, that's just rude as hell. Supposedly went extinct about 135 million years ago. Okay, same script as last time. Rock rat, let me guess it's the same thing. Based on a fossil record type, this rodent was believed to have gone extinct 11 million years ago, but it didn't. Conclusion, these are just a few examples of creature coexistence not being documented by the fossil record. Although human and dinosaur fossils have never been discovered together, this in no way refutes the biblical account. Wow, that might be one of the worst evidences for anything I've ever seen. At least they normally try and make it like confusing, but that's really stupid. We find fossils of a thing a long time ago, and that thing is still here. Therefore, humans must have lived with dinosaurs. Cool. Fucking awesome. Okay, we're nearing the end of this, guys. I like this article, Out of Africa and Dating Confusion. We've all experienced a little dating confusion, okay? It's a rite of passage. The dating was far from convincing. Been there. I like this this image that they have, the giraffe walking through the gates of hell. I showed this to Z earlier and she's like, that's a banger profile picture. So if anyone's looking for a profile picture update, there you go. That giraffe, fucking have at it. What does this have to say? Thank God this one is short. My computer's almost dead. Oh yeah, human evolution is in crisis. I don't think, actually no, human evolution currently is in crisis. I would say that. I mean, it's just shocking that a species so actively hell-bent on trying to destroy itself at every turn even still exists. We are prime evidence that natural selection clearly is a false. Is a false? We're gonna gloss that one over. Subsequently, a study by a group of paleoanthropologists on 2 fossilized human crania from Greece reported that the modern type crania dated to around 210,000 years ago, and lived about 40,000 years earlier than the Neanderthal cranium that was also found there. Hence, Homo sapiens appeared in Europe supposedly over 150 years earlier than thought. Not giving up on the OOAM, the out of Africa model, altogether, the authors said their findings support multiple dispersals of modern humans out of Africa. Yes, obviously, because do you think that it was just like one little group that were like, all right, guys, we're gonna head out to Africa and populate the rest of the world. You guys hold the fort here. We'll be back. See ya. Peace. Deuces. No, that's not how things work. But what the fuck do you expect from people who view the world as black and white, as good and evil, as there are only 2 ways that things can happen? They either left Africa once or they didn't leave it at all. How could they have left multiple times? How could they not have left multiple times? They didn't know what Africa was. They were walking around. They weren't just looking at a map being like, all right, guys, so here's the world. Where we dropping, boys? Where we dropping? Yeah, why don't we hit fucking wonky land on this one? However, the dating of the crania is as confused as the out of Africa model. The 2 crania were found embedded in the same breccia, separated by a few inches, yet were dated 40,000 years apart. What? They were initially dated at the same age, over 160,000 years ago, but the difference in morphology led to doubts they were the same age. So the thing they don't tell you about this is that the breccia that these skull fragments were found in was in a cave, and they were in 2 different, is it fluvial water deposits? Not lacustrine, that would be a lake. Water deposits, because water washed into the fucking cave. So it has been widely understood from the moment that this site was excavated by actual paleoanthropologists that the stratigraphy is really not worth all that much. This is not like 2 pieces of skull found in a giant bed of rock outside and they're tons of years apart and they're right next to each other. They're not that far apart. 40,000 years is really not that long in the grand scheme of things, and they are in a cave where water flows in and disturbs the sediments. But you don't say that because the only way that you can support this bullshit is by misrepresenting everything you fucking talk about. Next and final article. I saved the best one for last, guys. Check this out. Evolutionary Racism. A revealing secular book documents the huge change in attitudes to Indigenous Australians after Darwin's book appeared. Little content warning here for image, it'll pop up. It shows Aboriginal Australians in chains. It's rough. So if that's not up your alley, set the phone down or skip ahead for a minute. The sinful desire to dominate, reject, ignore, or mistreat others for one's own particular motives has never required much excuse. However, Darwin gave it a tremendous impetus, as has been shown before and by both evolutionists and creationist writers. Increase in brutality. Far from showing a progressive enlightenment as time goes on, one can see a distinct change for the worse after 1859. A marked increase in callousness, ill treatment, and brutality towards Aboriginal people became evident in official attitudes. I can't believe we only started mistreating indigenous people in 1859. Wow, gee, Christopher Columbus, Andrew Jackson, you guys were just so nice to them all the time. Are you fucking kidding me? Without getting too into the weeds on that, I hear what he is saying. Because the idea of an evolutionary model can lead to the idea of, you know, like some being better than others and others being inferior to those and things like that. It has been used to justify eugenics, genocide, racism, awful, awful, deplorable shit. It wasn't the idea of evolution that made people racist. It was that people were horribly fucking racist, then learned about evolution and science and used it to justify their pre-existing racist beliefs. I've talked about scientific racism a lot on this channel. The study of phrenology, of trying to find distinct differences between the races, that some were inherently more intelligent than others, or were more developed or civilized than the others by some inherent part of their physiology and their biology. And as an archaeology educator and an anthropology educator, I think it's really important to talk about these things because these fields have deep running roots in racism, in genocide, and every horrible thing under the sun. However, to frame this as though things got worse after 1859 because of Charles Darwin's book is the most insane shit I have ever heard to come out of the mouth of someone waving a fucking Bible. If I had to compile a list of every genocide motivated by religious ideology before the publication of On Origins of Species, it would take me fucking years. The Crusades, the conquest of North America, the conquest of South America. Now, I'm also not saying any of this to turn that around on them and say, well, you guys are just inherently violent. Far from it. My point with that is to say that we are fucking human. Dare I say, we are fucking animals. I think Christianity, like any religion, has a lot of good things to offer. I'm a big fan of Jesus from what I've heard about him. He seems like a good guy, all right? At the same time, the Ku Klux Klan are Christians. Does that mean that all Christians are in the Klan? No. I know a lot of people who are atheists. They are well-adjusted, kind, caring, compassionate members of society who are just as ethical and moral as anyone else. Joseph Stalin was an atheist. Does that mean that all atheists are Joseph Stalin? No. There is no race, religion, creed, or sexuality that makes you predisposed to being a shitty person. Instead, shitty people will exist in any body at any time and in any form, and they will use whatever the fuck they have at their disposal to continue being a shitty person. The topic being discussed in this article is one that is of the utmost importance, identifying how objective science can and will be used to justify despicable behavior. However, that is not the purpose of this article. The purpose is to frame any ideology outside of biblical literalism as something that is responsible for this, which is so fucking disingenuous, it makes my skin crawl. Religious fanaticism is such a driving force of, like, all of the big terrible words, you know? Like, we're literally watching it right fucking now. I don't know. What are we on? Are we on year fucking like 80 of, you know, genocide in Palestine? Are they doing that because of fucking evolution? No, it's not because of the faith, it's because they're a fucking evil empire, dude. Do you think the conquistadors did it because they were Christian? They thought they were doing it because they were Christian, but it was because there was an evil empire telling them that those people were the fucking savages. So they sent them to fucking do horrible shit, and then they did the horrible shit. That's just crazy, dude. That's just crazy. You know, I like doing these kind of off-the-cuff reaction things, but then I kind of reach the end here and I'm like, there's just so much juicy material here. I wish I synthesized a better conclusion, but you guys get what I'm saying. I'd just be rehashing the same shit anyway, so I'm gonna just end it here. If you enjoyed me keeping you company while you know, played video games or, you know, did chores around your house, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave an interaction on the video. Things like likes, shares, and comments help boost this video in the algorithm, which gives us the ad revenue that we need to keep making these videos for you for free. Like I've said before, it's like thanking the bus driver. It doesn't cost you a cent, and it helps us continue doing what we do here. If you'd like to support us more directly, we have some beautiful merch made by my wonderful partner, all real art made by a real human human being that isn't just, you know, shitty YouTuber merch that's just like my logo on like a hoodie. Since I refuse to shill out to a VPN company, merch is our other source of keeping the channel running, so it's a big help. I greatly appreciate any purchases. Link to that is in the description of this video. I hope you enjoy all of it. And if you enjoyed this video, why let the binge stop there? Check out another one. I'm sure there'll be something recommended, or you can check out one of these bad boys if you haven't already. And lastly, I'd like to give a massive thank you to my creative team. While this video may have just been an hour of background noise for you, each one of these is representative of literally hundreds of hours of work from 8 different people. So make sure to give them a big thank you as well. Oh, and lastly, a big hello to everyone watching at the live premiere, Sunday nights, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for tuning in. Mwah. Ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay curious, stay inquisitive, and remember, I was born in the wrong generation. I should have been born in, what, 1857, before racism was invented. I have to get all this shit out of my attic. I don't really know why I decided to film up here. It was a bit of a spontaneous decision. Wow, it's snowing like crazy. Ugh, global warming my ass, liberals. There was another article that your screen is being observed. What the fuck? Oh, is it because it's a screen recording? Why does it have to say it like that? Your screen is being observed. Who up observing they screen? Most people, actually. I would hazard a guess you actually quite possibly could be up observing your screen right now. Mom, don't come in, I'm observing my screen. Shadi, let me observe her screen. Neo-Marxists? There was an article that it said neo-Marxist in it, but I didn't find where it said that. It's really cold up here, guys. I'm gonna be totally honest. Temperature's dropped a lot. Okay, never mind. It has dropped about 2 degrees. I guess I've just been sitting in it for a while, so. Dun, 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 dun. All right, this is where the insurance claim happens. I don't know if I should or shouldn't be recording this part, because this will either help me in my insurance claim case, or they're gonna be like, yeah, no, we're not covering that shit. What do you mean he died falling through the ceiling trying to get his camera because he was talking about creationism or some shit? This is the last thing you see before you die. Dun, 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 dun.